Hi, welcome back to Echoes and Edges, the Broken and Beautiful podcast. I'm Patria, your host for Echoes and Edges and the founder of the Broken and Beautiful Collective. Before we dive into any introductions or content, I need to let you know that this episode touches on themes of grooming, abuse of power, and spiritual harm. We won't share details that overwhelm the nervous system or re traumatize listeners, but we will speak plainly about patterns of manipulation, silence, and institutional avoidance. If you need to pause, breathe, or return later, please honor that. So, today we're opening a sacred story that was held alone in isolation for a long time. And I'm honored to be delighted by the holder of this story, Hannah May. Hannah is the founder of Sacred Story Space, where she offers NFTC certified story coaching. She creates safe, intentional spaces for people to explore their past, reclaim their voice, and live more fully into who they were designed to be. She brings over 25 years of experience as a business owner, coach, and church lay leader, and is certified in narrative-focused trauma care through the Allender Center. Hannah is also a member of the Broken and Beautiful Remote Collective, and she believes every person is made in the image of God, and that when truth is held with love and kindness, it brings liberation. I'm so grateful to have you with us today. Welcome, Hannah. Would you add
Yeah,
anything to that intro?
no, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, and I'm just so honored to be here with you today to share this
Yes,
space and be available for our listeners.
it's honoring to have you here. Thank you so much. So, before we dive into more particulars around questions, would you be willing to give context, share a little bit of the story of what we're going to be talking about, in a way that feels kind to you, honoring to the story and listeners and yourself?
Sounds good. Yes. So this is a story from when I was about 17 years old. I was really active in my music ministry at church. It was kind of what I was known for, and was just that was my happy place. And we got a new music minister there at church. He was well, I thought he was fabulous. He was single and dynamic, and he was doing cutting edge work in the music industry and had already trained all around the world and was planning to do worship leading and training all over the world. And so I was just enamored, and he was hot. So and so I found myself flirting with him, and eventually in a relationship, a secret relationship, and then just in heartbreak and turmoil with the church. So really impacted my relationship with God and my relationship with the church for a long time. So we'll be talking about that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
the courage. I'm thinking of the iterations of
Hmm.
opening and
Hmm.
revealing. You're even today describing with um, some what is the word I'm looking for? It's like some awareness. Like there's just this sense of a young girl here,
Yeah.
like very enamored, taken with
Hmm.
wanting something of this
Yeah.
person, like he
Hmm.
was obviously he was dynamic and charismatic. And
So dynamic.
yeah, yeah. And that drew you. And so
Hmm.
talk to us a little bit about how you've come to understand in that moment, even as you were describing the relational experience, just seeing him, meeting him for the first time, and then also as you've come to understand the setup for vulnerability. What made you vulnerable in this particular circumstance?
Oh my goodness, Patria, so much. I think one piece was I loved music. I loved being, involved in the music and the worship. And it was the first time that I got a glimpse of what my future could hold. And so that was really a driving force behind a lot of my courage and the risks that I took was I was like, oh my goodness, I could actually live into my dreams. And so, of course, totally unaware just so naive because the system that I had been raised in was, in fact, 100% set me up to become the perfect victim for this particular minister. And so when I think what's helpful to look at or to hear about are the different lenses through which I experienced my story and the lenses of systems. And so I had my church system, I had my family system, and then there was the school system. And they each played a very big role in how I became the girl that was able to fall for a man twice her age in a secret relationship that no one knew about. It's just, there was no way that wasn't going to be an option to have happen for me. So I'll share just a little bit about those different systems. And I'll start with the church system because that's a really important one. They're all really important, and we're all raised with different systems and they impact. So I was raised in a family that was deeply involved in the shepherding or the discipleship movement of like the 60s to the 80s. Very charismatic movement, but it was marked by rigid, top-down authority, 100% patriarchal structure, and demands for unquestioned submission. I can hear God better for you than you can for yourself. Mm. Members were expected to have a major life decisions covered by a house group or a cell leader. Small group leaders are what we would know them now, an elder or pastor. Like, I'm talking about the choices as far as where we live, where we work, who we marry, and even whether to see a doctor.
Complete control.
Total, complete control. And especially for the women. Like, women were expected to get married and have children. That was the holy grail of how you determine your value and your worth was determined. And so obviously along in that was your purity. And your purity was what you had to offer. That was your golden diamond gift that you could offer someone. And without that, you had no value. You had no worth. So like you had to protect that at all costs. So then you have my family of origin system. And this was also a totalitarian control, like environment. The difference was that my parents actually co-parented, co-led. They were 100% in sync with each other on how they were raising us. And yet my dad was the ultimate authority, right? So they were equal and yet a very twisted form of complementarianism. So not allowed to question anything, not allowed to think for myself. Curiosity is not welcome. And again, like your value as a woman is to get married and bear children. And so part of the grooming, part of the training for me is that in my home, I was trained to be attuned to other people, whoever was like the parent, the elder, whoever the most important person in the room was. My job, and this was explicitly taught to me, was that I was to meet their needs without them ever having to say a word. If they had to ask me for something, if they had to clue me in to what they wanted or needed, then I had failed. And so you're talking about a little girl who's like not even 10 yet. So I am going to be obedient. I am obedient. I am compliant. I am not pushing back. I want them to be happy. And fleshing that out a little bit more, because this has really broad-reaching impact and affect for me and for others who have similar situations. I was being verbally, physically, psychologically, and sexually abused on the reg. And so I had to like really just block out most of the things that were happening in order to survive. And by the time I graduated high school, when all this was coming to a head with the music minister, I really only remembered some verbal and physical abuse and a couple of weird, like sexually inappropriate situations with some men in my family. But other than that, it really was like, it's not a good life. I don't like being at home, but it's okay, I guess, And so
let's just pause there for a minute because you just threw down a lot of information.
And I probably did.
Well, and it's not too much information, but it is a lot of information that I know you have worked and curated over decades. To remember, to recall, to be able to make sense of. You've had good loving, help,
Yeah.
continue to, most of us do with stories of trauma. I want to just make a couple of points about what you've already said. And one is that in a very personal way, an explicit way, your dreams were exploited so early. So your dreams of being maybe a little girl doesn't dream of being obedient per se, but she wants to be loved, right? A little girl wants to be loved, and a little girl who's on the regular being abused in all these different ways is going to need to work extra hard at finding ways to be loved. And here you had a step 1, 2, and 3 of how to do it, which is make sure everyone is pleased with you by paying attention to what they need, right? And you also talked about dreams. In the middle of all of this, somehow you stayed connected to a part of you that longed for something.
Yes. I think that really provided me hope and
That's right. That's,
vision for the future. It was
yeah.
like a lifeline for me that there could be something different. There could be something beautiful to look forward to.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so without any more context, we could immediately segue to then you're 17, but there's more that is included in the setup. So yes, so let's move forward then with the next part of school. So tell us more about how school set you up for vulnerability.
And I think it'd be helpful to also just add in, I had made note of this, and I think it's important to share, is I was very much having to live a double life. I
Mm-hmm.
lived a life as a Christian teen, a Christian girl in Christian schools. Um, and so, like, really good girl. But
Mm-hmm.
then I come home, and once that door closes, it's a completely different world. And so, without even realizing it, I began to like be really skilled at living a double life. And I think mine is a really like very black and white example of how that can happen, but I think so many of us live double lives with, with our families of origin. It's like we're expected to be one way in the world, and then when we come home, it's a very different environment. And we're not allowed to speak about that when we're out in the world. And so that can really play into how we get set up for these situations because we're already accustomed to secrets. We're already accustomed to hiding things. And so it doesn't feel unnatural to do that. You don't have the same level of questioning yourself, like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, because it's not a conscious thing. It's a
Right.
subconscious.
For sure. And so I think you're saying too that there's something about when the door closed at home that felt not like you were a good girl. Like there was something shifted when the door closed, and out there you could be a good girl, but here inside home you couldn't be a good girl.
No, I mean, there was no way. What I was being asked to do, um, well, not even asked, right? So without words,
Expected, groomed,
I knew.
taught.
By then, I
Mhm.
had been groomed so long by my own family. So it was like really, I had to shut that part of myself off because I wanted to be alive. I wanted to feel good. I wanted to feel like I was a normal teenage girl with a normal teenage life. And at home, that was not welcome. I had to become someone else to stay alive within my own home in the
Mhm.
system.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and can we just underscore what you said there? I wanted to be alive. I wanted to be alive. Listeners, if you ever don't understand how abuse happens, listen to that sentence because abuse is always about power dynamics. Wanting to be alive makes you vulnerable, regardless of circumstances. And if the circumstances are unkind or harmful, they will take advantage of that desire because it's written all over your face as a 9-year-old. I mean, little 9-year-old girls want to be alive.
That's right. That's
That's
right. They
right.
do. They want to be
Yeah.
delighted. They want to be seen. They want
Yes.
to be like, oh, you're amazing. So yeah,
Yes.
we will do what we have to do to get what we can.
That's true.
Yeah. So I would say, like, just to mention about my school system, because I think that really is a key factor in my story. So I initially started school in first grade at a little private school, a little Baptist private school that all of our church kids went to. They didn't have a school for us yet, so they sent us to this little Baptist private school. And it was so sweet. It was like the first time in my life that I was being seen, and I was like touted as being smart and capable and talented. And I felt so good when I went to school and went to chapel, and I'm learning about the Bible and I'm learning Bible verses. I fell in love with flannel graphs, made my mom get them so I could have them at home. And so I loved school. I felt safe there. I felt seen and celebrated. And I heard other children sharing their testimonies. And I came home and asked my mom, hey, have I been saved? And she said, oh, yeah, when you were like 3. And that just didn't sit well with me as like a 6-year-old, 7-year-old. And so I'll never forget, it just really compelled me. I went into my dad's office and I knelt down next to the bed that was in his office. And I said to God, I want to remember when I asked you into my heart, when I asked you to be, Jesus to me. I don't remember. And so I want to remember. And to this day, I still remember the feel of the bedspread underneath my elbows and my knees on the floor. And I believe in that moment I was saved. And I believe that started a trajectory of my relationship with God that is beautiful, and it's been very complex, but I really believe it saved my life. And so then, and when I entered the 5th grade, the church had decided no more outside schooling. We're going to do this all ourselves. And so we had teachers who weren't even accredited. They didn't have college degrees. They weren't accredited. I mean, it was, again, just all about the control. And so I was no longer in a place where I was celebrated or seen or loved. And so school just became something to get through. And so the school system, again, played such a role because it was part of my salvation initially, and then part of the programming and the control again of not being able to get out. And some of us as teenagers just naturally started pushing back against the system. And so there was normal teenage rebellion, and then there was also this need to stay under the radar to fit with the system. And so it led to a lot of confusion and complexity. But those 3 systems really set me up to absolutely be the perfect victim for the music minister when that time came.
Yeah.
And it also gave me the faith that I've had that has allowed me to know who God is outside of who people who call themselves Christians are.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been a really key thing for me, is to have that thread of truth going through my life that I have been able to come back to, even through all of the complexity of my rage and anger and confusion with God, towards God.
Yeah, there's something about the embodiment of the little girl and where, even as you're talking, so much of the setup and the descriptions are very mental. These are mental images, things that are created. But when you talked about your elbows on the bedspread, there's an embodiment. It feels like there was something that aligned. And you said the word saved. And I understand in the context of Christianity, what we mean by that is salvation. And also what I heard when you said that, and you even clarified a couple sentences later, like, it saved my life. And I can't tell you how many times I hear the story of victims of early sexual harm, especially women. And it's anecdotal. I don't know why it is, it's true of myself as well, that there's something about Jesus. There's something about, there's something real that happens with this person, I don't, entity that feels inside of us, but bigger than us. And
Yes.
once I had someone whisper to me, I've heard Jesus talk to me since I was a little girl,
Yeah.
am I normal? And I said, well, I mean, what's normal? I don't know how to answer that
Right.
question, but I will say it makes good sense. And I'm so grateful that you did, because
Yeah.
it is literally salvation.
Hmm.
It saves sanity.
Yes.
And there's something in, like you said, that thread of truth, which is the way that I was
Hmm.
hearing that connection that
Hmm.
happened.
Yeah.
And you're 6 or 7 years old. I mean, you're
Right.
just a little girl,
So
and
tiny.
and so tiny. 6 or 7 year olds sometimes still have pudge on their knuckles.
It's true.
I
It's
always think of
true.
hands, the hands of a 6 or 7 year old are so tiny,
You're
and the
so
hands of a
tiny.
3 year old, even
Yeah.
tinier, still very babyish.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit. I think the implication is really clear, but tell us a little bit about what you were taught about questioning leaders.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, talk to us about that.
Yeah. So what I was taught was you don't.
Hmm.
Like, you absolutely accept what is said. You don't think for yourself. If your thoughts are different, you're wrong. Like, you will listen to us and you will do as we say. It's just that simple. And so that is an act of rebellion that I've had to take, a holy one, of allowing myself to be curious and ask questions, even when I'm afraid that it's going to annoy people. Like, to give myself permission to be curious and to ask questions, to reclaim that part of my God given image of being, like, all of us are supposed to be able to be curious and have safe spaces where we can be curious about everything. As a child, like, it's so important. So anyway, that's probably
Hmm.
just a little side soapbox, but
Yeah.
yeah, curiosity matters, and ability to be curious. And I would say to everyone listening, if you don't have spaces where you can be curious and ask really tough questions, may I bless you to find new spaces. Like, life is too short.
Hmm.
Find spaces where you can be curious and you can ask the hard questions of God, of others, of your belief systems. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. You have been given a heart and a mind, the mind of Christ. If you are saved, then you have the mind of Christ. The Spirit is within you, and you have the capacity to gain wisdom and insight and knowledge and education, and you deserve that.
Right now, when you think about these
Mm-hmm.
experiences, these early formative
Mm-hmm.
experiences, and then, we opened with the context of the story that we're really
Yeah.
talking about today. We're not talking
Mm-hmm.
directly about details, but we're
Right.
unpacking the story a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, just a reminder that you're 17, in
Mm-hmm.
this story. You have a
Mm-hmm.
35-year-old, hot, charismatic, really experienced is the word that comes to my mind. Man, grown 35-year-old man, come and start leading worship for the youth.
Yep. Yep.
And this was something you enjoyed doing anyway. Sounds like music,
Yes.
leadership, kind of
Yes.
your thing.
Yes, it was really my great joy, and it was actually my friends who said, "Hey, you have a good voice. You should join the music team." And we, in the summertime, we would put on people would write plays, musicals, and then we would perform them. And we would go to other churches or down to
Mm.
Mexico and perform, just in a very small time, like nothing fancy. But I even went on to, like, do other things with the music, and so it was very important to me. It was a happy place for me. It was a place where I felt centered and grounded and seen and celebrated. Again, like, we're looking for those places, right, where people affirm us and call out our beauty and our giftedness. And that's actually something we need. That's not a want.
Right.
That's something that
Yeah.
we all actually need.
That's right.
And so when we find those spaces, especially given my context or context is similar, we are going to be vulnerable to people
Mm-hmm.
who are going to prey on that. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's unfortunately, it's just all too real.
True. But at the same time, this was a hyper controlled situation where the idea was that, like, the implication of this type of control is this is where safety is. That's the idea of it. We're not going to let you go out there to the world and be impacted by the world because it's not safe out there. And in here, it's safe. And
Yeah.
so that's the implication under which you're living. And
Mhm.
I'm sure you'd been told that a million times if you'd been told it once,
Oh,
like this is where its
yeah.
safety is, right? So
Oh, yeah. Well,
here
yeah.
comes this guy, right?
Right.
And so what helped you? Like, because you are completely enmeshed or
Yeah.
interwoven into the
Yeah.
system. And
Mhm.
so what helped you recognize, either then or much later, that
Right.
what happened wasn't like you having a crush
Mm.
on an older guy? It was
Right.
not mentorship.
Right.
Yeah. What came along?
Yeah.
This was grooming.
Well, it was, and Patria, it took me so decades. I was 50 before I shared this story in my first NFTC group, NFTC one, and it was one of the stories that I engaged that first year. And I felt so much shame because even then I felt complicit. I thought that I had pursued him, that I had initiated, that I kept pursuing him. And so I really did not see the distinction that I was a child and he was a man. And there were things that I did. When I first flirted with him, we were down in Mexico doing this big youth event. And he and another pastor were sharing a hotel room, and they let us have access to the hotel room. And I had took my red lipstick and I wrote flirty stuff all over the mirror. And so that's how I remember it starting, right? And he was always very aloof, and he was never affirming to me. And he never said anything in the whole time that led me to believe that he really cared about me, that he wanted me around, but he kept letting me come back. And things kept moving further and further along the lines physically. And so this was over the course of a year. And just his brilliance of reading me, of knowing how to manipulate me so skillfully. It was not until I was 50 and I started doing story work. So, yes, this is a shameless plug for story work. Like, it
Yes.
took a skilled facilitator and those other women in my group of like, oh, so kindly, gently continuing to push and ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so hard for me to swallow that it was abuse.
Mm-hmm.
But I started to see, I mean, I knew it, right? I knew it. And I
Your
knew what
body
had
did.
happened with the
Mm-hmm.
men at my church. Like I knew that well, I hadn't got to that part yet, but I knew that it wasn't right. But I felt so much shame. I still remember what I was wearing the day that I went to his house and things like went over the line into intercourse. And I remember how I felt when I left his house, the shame that I carried with me. And so it took a lot of love to get through that shame, to make a safe enough space where I could sit with that 17-year-old part of me and begin to see what she had really experienced.
Yeah, thank you so much for the emotion on your face. And I feel
Yeah,
that with you. And I'm
yeah,
thinking too about like just the realities of, I'm thinking about the good girl outside there, and then
Mhm.
you didn't call her the bad girl inside, but there's
Right.
right, but there's that implication of
Yeah.
ownership of whatever that was that
Mhm.
happened in there. It was on
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
and so you came into this relationship,
Mhm.
that's not what it was,
Right.
but that's
Right.
how you thought of it.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
And so you thought, as okay, I have lost my way here. The door closed. I'm in the inside. I'm not being the good girl here. And yet, um, let's just pause for a second and not assume understanding for listeners in terms of, again, power dynamics and how a 17-year-old young woman certainly has developed, often, most of the time, physically. There's a physical maturity. There's oftentimes a psychological maturity. There's a way to communicate that can be really fun and flirty, right? We know this, right? That can be very, very true. And by flirty, we just mean engaged,
Mhm.
delightful,
Mhm. Alive.
engaging,
Yeah.
alive, exactly, pursuant, wanting
Yeah.
to be pursued. And there's just this
Yeah.
something really precious about
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
description of 17-year-old you that I want to
Yeah.
really hold on to in our hearts. And
Mhm.
I want to invite listeners to really hold
Yeah.
the 17-year-old Hannah was just alive. And
Yeah.
somehow, by
Yeah.
the
I
grace
know.
of God, through her elbows on
Yeah.
that little
Yeah.
bedspread,
Little bedspread.
yeah, here she is alive. And this 35-year-old man who played the game of aloofness, like you said. And so you talked about the brilliance of grooming, but I want to say that's the piece right there that captured your heart, right? Because you're a woman of great passion. You were a 17-year-old girl, young woman of great passion, and something to move toward is going to draw you. And so that aloofness.
Yeah. And the fact that you've been taught your whole life that to be married
Yeah,
is the
exactly.
epitome. And who
Yes.
you marry determines your status and your standing.
Hmm.
And so here's a man who's a worship leader. He's going to
Hmm.
travel all over the world teaching people worship. What's more holy than that? So, like, oh my goodness, I get to have this holy life with this super educated man and like so talented. He was, very cutting edge on the technology that he was using. People were just in awe. And so, like, what I love about the 17-year-old part of me, and I've got her picture sitting here on the desk so I can just like
Thank
have
you.
her face in front of me. Like,
Hmm.
she was a risk taker. She
Hmm.
was like, she believed in herself. I believed in myself. There was something, even in the midst of all the crazy, that said, I am enough to actually have my dreams come true. I'm going to let myself pursue that. And obviously, no understanding of the complete evil of the system, of how that's all being played out, right? No wisdom whatsoever. So much naivety that had to be there to protect me from seeing what was really happening. But I don't know. I just think that I'm like so proud of that girl for taking a risk and like going for what she thought she wanted, that was going to get her out, that was going to save her, that
That's
was
it.
going to get her a better life.
Yep.
Um, and so, wow, how could you fault someone for that? Like, how could you fault someone for wanting to follow their dreams, to take a risk?
I mean, why? Why would you? Why would we? And yet that's what happened, right? So talk to us about, yeah, the ownership of the store, like recognizing. So there was this NFTC part
Mm-hmm.
where there was this shift in
Yeah.
understanding that this was actually abuse, and very high level, and it's layered because it's institutional, it's authority, it's all the things. Um, my goodness. So what happened then? When you realized, what happened next?
I mean, I mean, anger,
Oh,
like so much anger.
mhm.
And just to like share briefly, because I think this will help with the context of the story. So he was moving away. And so I was like, basically had gone and to tell him how much I professed my love for him and how much I wanted to be with him and how much I'll do anything. Like, and again, like taking this risk, really putting herself out there. And so he took it over the line to intercourse, and it was very disrespectful and it was very short lived. And then he told me to get dressed and leave. And I never heard from him again. So now I've taken the risk. I've tried to follow my dream. I'm being alive. And I've just now, in my mind, made the worst decision of my life. I have failed as a woman. I have failed as a Christian. I failed my family, my community. And so the shame that I felt was so unbelievable. So it was maybe 3 months later, I went to my youth pastor and his wife, who was my voice teacher, and confessed to them that I had made this horrific decision, that I had done this horrible thing, and how I was crying. I just said, how will God heal my heart? Really, what I was asking, how can I be redeemed?
Right.
Like,
Because it's all your fault.
it's all my fault, and I've given away, I guess, the only thing that had value. Like, it's so insane, like, to think about that. Like, of course, that's not true, but
Right.
that's so much of what we were taught. And so he got really angry. And he said, "We're going to confront this." And I said, "No, no, no. I don't want to confront this. I just want, like, I don't need anybody to get in trouble. I just want to know, how can God heal my heart? How can I get my heart healed?" My voice teacher never said anything. He is like adamant there's going to be a confrontation. And so I am just terrified. And he says to me, "You will go home and tell your father what you did, or I will, as the church." I said, "Oh, okay, I'll take care of that." So, flash forward, there was a confrontation with the senior pastor of the church, my youth pastor, the music minister who flew in from wherever he was living then at the time, and my father. No women present. I was forced to give explicit details. They kept digging into the explicit details and asked me, had I gone to the doctor? Could I prove that what I was saying was true? And I was so confused by this. Like, why are you
Mhm.
asking me this? Why would I go to the doctor? You know, like,
Mhm.
I was so confused. Now I understand they were wanting to see if I had proof that I could back up what I was saying. But who at 17 in that situation is going to have, I mean, you'd have to be a really street savvy girl, and I was not that girl. So the end result was they called me names. They told me I was lying, told me to get out, basically, get out. He has done nothing wrong. And so what I started to realize in NFTC and the story work was that confrontation was a confrontation of me. They were confronting me. They were not confronting him. And like, you got to know that, you need to know the particularities of your story for them to make sense, to start to put the pieces in place. And that is part of what story work and working with a group and a skilled listener gave me, is the ability to see things I could not see on my own, even as a 50-year-old woman.
Well, yeah, because it was so baked in that
Mm-hmm.
it was your fault, and
Right.
and that it's your job to make sure everyone's responsible. So you wouldn't have
Right.
possibly had a chance to
That's
even
right.
have a different perspective or a different lens to look at this experience through.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I just put that story away. Like, I was so ashamed. I was like, whoa, I'm just going to we're just going to put that over here. I don't even know how to categorize that other than shame. So story work has been beautiful for me and for this story. I've had it engaged for like 3 years on end, and then with my counselor, and like so much life has been given back to me, and dignity through doing the story work around this particular story. So
I love what you just said there, that through compassionate eyes, through
mhm.
compassionate and skilled
Skilled.
care,
Yes.
and curious, to
Mm-hmm.
use your word from earlier, the importance of
Yeah.
curiosity. Like, can we
Right.
be curious about this?
That's right.
And helping to actually sit with the shame. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I like to point out to people is that story work actually increases shame in safe
Mm-hmm.
ways, because the
Yeah.
shame has to be increased in order to be experienced differently. There has
Yeah.
to be a seeing of it fully, or
Mm-hmm.
more fully, in
Yeah.
the presence of compassionate care
Yes.
that is skilled and kind and can help walk you through and
Mm-hmm.
understand why this feels the way that it does. But
Yes.
here's a different lens
Right.
through which to look at this. And sometimes that takes time, and there are these
Yes.
formative stories where there's the story with the youth pastor in
Mm-hmm.
his home where he
Mm-hmm.
assaults you.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then there's the story where the multiple tribunal
Mm-hmm.
kills you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you talk about impact to your relationship with the church and your relationship to God. It was not long after that that I turned my back on God. I told
Of
him, if this
course.
is what it looks like to have your care and protection, I'm
Yeah.
out. I don't
Yeah.
need you. I don't want any part of you. And so there was, maybe a 6, 9 month period where I was no longer even able to pray. And I'd always had a really strong, robust relationship with the Lord. And then things got really, really hard. And life was very, very hard. And I very desperately needed the Holy Spirit. And I had a couple of friends who were praying for me. And one night I finally broke through and was able to start to pray again. And God met me so deeply and so richly. And I was like 21, and so really like wrestled with my relationship with God and morality and my lifestyle all through my 20s because of everything that had happened. And I think part of what I've seen is that the healthier I get, the healthier the churches are that I go to. But it has been a really painful journey in a lot of ways because I have consistently found churches to be either ill equipped or not equipped or unwilling to handle stories of harm
Mhm.
and abuse and trauma. And so, I've kind of seen it all. I've seen churches where they tried to cast out demons from me and just renounce every sin and stronghold your family has ever participated in. And yet, when I tried to bring up trauma, then they were like, "No, that's not possible. We knew your family. That's not possible." And so, like being shut down there, and again, just being like feeling like I'm being sent off into the wild with like, where is the church? Where is the church where I can be safe and trust and receive care and see actually the hands and feet of Christ in action? And
Mhm.
so that's just been a journey that, continues
Yeah.
to be taken.
Well, you said so many important things there. One that really struck me as really well said is that the healthier I get, the healthier churches I choose.
Mm-hmm.
And also it's an ongoing process, because the problem isn't that every person that makes up the church is intending to do these things, but the
Yeah.
system is broken.
Yeah.
And so so you have these themes of everywhere you go, some iteration of blame is happening to you,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's
Yes.
all basically, you're the problem, and
Mm-hmm.
you've got the demon, and
Mm-hmm.
it's the same story from history being repeated over and over and over
Right.
again. Not to take away from the particularity of your story at
Right.
all, but it's
No, but
such a
it's
witch
good to
hunt.
see it from a
It's
macro level to think
Mhm.
about it, of how it impacts all of us.